Hello, world, and welcome to another fantastic edition of the Cybersecurity Matters podcast. I'm your co-host, Dominic Vogel, and my good old-fashioned friend, I guess I'm not good old-fashioned, I'm not sure what you are, but joining me as always is my amazing co-host, Christian Redshaw. How are you doing today?
Doing good with that introduction. How can I not be doing good?
Who is our guest today?
Well, today we have a gentleman by the name of Vaughn Hazen. He is the Chief Information Security Officer for CN Rail. And so that is a huge, if you're not familiar, railway organization, 20,000 miles of railway network across North America, over $250 billion worth of goods being transported annually. So let's just say that they're no joke, and they've got a lot to protect.
I'm going to say that's probably one of the higher profile CISOs we've probably ever had on the show. So this should be a fantastic convo. Plus, I love trains. So let's bring Vaughn on, and we'll see what he has to say.
Vaughn, welcome to the show, Cybersecurity Matters. It's great to have you today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome.
Vaughn, I think you and I just recently connected on LinkedIn, and when I reached out, it was actually, I think, over a job posting that you you put out there, and I thought it was just really interesting the way you put it out there. It was just the way it was worded. It came across as very warm and human, which I often don't see with a lot of CISOs. I really appreciated that, and it's great to be able to have you on the show. And one of the first questions that I'd love to learn a bit more about who you are, how you came to be the CISO at CN, and a bit more about your career narrative.
Okay, thank you. Well, I kind of fell into cybersecurity. It wasn't something that I set out to do. I'd been in the Army, because my brother said, hey, you're not doing anything with your life. You might as well at least join the Army so you get money for college. So I did that. I came back, got an electrical engineering degree. While I was going through that, I was working as an intern for a power company, and they came around with the radio system, and we're talking about rolling out the radio system. And I said, well, I did communications in the Army. Do you have any room for engineers? I'm getting ready to graduate. So they pulled me in, and I became a telecom engineer. Well, working as a telecom engineer, I was putting in phone systems, working through all of those kinds of things. And we started to get phone freakers who would break into the phone system to, get free international calling back when it was really expensive to do that. So I learned a little bit about security to shut those guys out. And when we started pulling into the internet and doing things like that, I had to learn a lot more. So when I ended up going to Solvay, which was where I first started officially working as cybersecurity, information security at the time, I was having a little bit of a disagreement on placement of some of the tooling in the environment with the, at that time, corporate information security officer. And, her consultant said, no, he's right. And she said, okay, you're in cybersecurity now. So I've been doing it for the last 20 some years. And, I was chief information security officer at Freeport-McMoRan when, I felt after 7 years, I'd put the program together pretty well there, and the recruiters started coming out looking and said, hey, we've got a great opportunity for a large industrial company like I've always worked in up in Canada. And I thought, sounds like an adventure, and it's been fantastic coming in here and working with the great people that I've been working with. Having great challenges, because we are a 100-plus-year-old company. We've got a lot of interesting legacy environments, a lot of interesting practices that have been put together over the years, and a lot of history, a lot of good challenges to dig your teeth into and learn from.
That's really, really interesting, Vaughn. And in terms of maybe bring it a bit more timely from a COVID perspective, how has COVID sort of affected, or has it added additional security challenges to what you had been dealing with pre-COVID?
It really hasn't been that much of a difference for us. And the reason why is because we had the building blocks in place ahead of time. The VPN solutions were in place. The biggest challenge that we had was rolling out some of the collaboration tooling to allow people to collaborate when they're not working face to face. Because historically, we've been, very much an in-person, Montreal headquartered organization where everybody got together face to face, and that's part of why it's such a good human experience to work with these people, because everybody's just used to working together like that. But now we've had to do it from our studies at or in our homes, and it's been nice to have the collaboration tools that allow us to have that video face to face, so we can see each other and still have some of those kind of water cooler type conversations that you don't get to have ordinarily when you're working remotely. So that's been something we've had to build out, but everything else was in place in terms of the cybersecurity aspects. So it really hasn't been difficult from that perspective. The only thing that we've had to do is we've noticed a big uptick in a lot of the phishing and targeted attacks against our users who are working remotely, but they're working on our equipment. They're working with the multi-factor authentication, all of those kinds of things that make it secure to do so, but just doing it remotely now.
That's really interesting. One more quick question before I pass over to Christian. Do you get to ride in the trains frequently? Because I'm a huge train nut. I love trains.
Yeah, trains are fantastic. I haven't ridden in any trains, but we did actually buy our home on purpose near the tracks, and the reason for that is because I wanted to be near the station, because I took the train into work while we were working downtown. So on our walks through the park, we actually do walk right by the tracks, and I see the trains go by. Day or night, they're moving the economy. I mean, that's a big part of what we do, and it's important work, and that's part of the reason why I love it.
Very cool.
Awesome. So Vaughn, in your role as a Chief Information Security Officer for CN, it's your job to make cybersecurity relevant and meaningful and impactful for the organization and for the users, as you say. From your perspective, why does cybersecurity matter?
Well, the thing is our role is to basically limit risk for the organization. It's to make that an acceptable level of risk. We're basically loss prevention, for the organization, and we're also part of the safety and security aspect in terms of human safety, because as we put more and more technology into the trains, there's the potential that it could be misused and have a real safety impact. And so that's another big part of why we do it. Now, in terms of our leadership, it's not a big deal for me to try to communicate to them. They already understand that risk is there. What's important for me to be able to communicate to them is really what we're doing about it, and what are the risk priorities, and try to keep them informed on what the threat actors are, and basically where the risk is coming from, so they understand basically what our threat landscape looks like, and they understand what we're doing about it and whether or not we're in a position that they're comfortable with. So that's my responsibility there with leadership. For the rest of the organization, it's about communicating to them what their role is in this whole exercise. So what are they needing to do in order to keep us secure, and of course helping them understand why it matters. We have a number of priorities in terms of safety. Life safety is absolutely critical when you're in large industrial organizations like ours. It can be dangerous working with heavy equipment, like a locomotive. Those kinds of things move. They're hard to stop. And if you get in the way, you're going to get hurt. So it's important that we emphasize safety at every step of the way, and at the same time, we're helping people understand that cybersecurity has a safety impact, but it also has an impact to the ongoing viability of the business in terms of the losses that we could incur from a significant risk, and also, we could have impacts, from a regulatory side with fines and things like that if we're not careful with the privacy of our employees or any of the other data that we have that may be regulatory controlled. So those are the kinds of things that we have to communicate to them, and through the security awareness campaigns that we do. It goes back to what Ira Winkler, I'm sure you've heard him say this before, common sense requires common knowledge.
That's right.
And so you really have to help people understand, what's important around this and how it works, and let them exercise common sense, because really cybersecurity is all about common sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Those are compelling reasons, for cybersecurity, particularly in your organization. You've got that personal safety factor. You've got protecting from financial loss and protecting the organization itself. So very, very clear and present danger there, and a really good reason to promote cybersecurity. Do you ever find that you get some pushback, maybe in prior roles or in your current role, where people feel like cybersecurity is getting in the way of business processes or preventing people from being able to do their jobs? Have you found that kind of tension and struggle at times?
Yeah. Well, look, there's I think a fallacy that people believe that you have to ruin the business to implement cybersecurity, and that's not always the case. I think Malcolm Harkins has written a book about reducing the friction in cybersecurity, and basically it's all about what are the controls that we need to have in place to manage the risk. And how can we implement those controls without having significant impact on the way that people do business? Now, you're always going to have something that changes, and people are typically resistant to change. But I think that if you have a calm discussion with people and you work through, okay, what are your concerns? You try to understand, what's happening in the business and what are their real concerns, and you just work through and say, okay, well, how can we make this work for you and address this need that you have, along with the need we have of reducing the risk and managing that. And so if you have that conversation, you can work through that fairly easily. And I'm not going to get too deep in the technical side of this, but I had this before in one of my previous organizations, where historically they had a separate token where they had to enter numbers in order to do the multi-factor authentication and to get into the VPN, and everything was kind of a hassle. And one of the things that we did is we said, look, they've logged in to the machine, so they've already authenticated. We've got the what they know aspect of authentication. They've got a device that we've issued to them. We put a certificate on it, so that we can recognize. So we validate that certificate. That's their second factor. Mm-hmm. We set up the VPN to automatically connect. As soon as they see an internet access, it automatically connects. And the combination of those two just made it to where, boom, they were, they turned on, they logged in, and they were on the network. And I got so much positive feedback from the organization doing that one thing, which addressed a number of security concerns, because doing that, we avoided them, connecting directly to the internet. We avoided them, doing what I call naked browsing, where they had no protection on them. We had the same controls on those machines that were remote as if they were in the office. And we never had that exposure, because as soon as they got an internet connection, boom, they were directly on our network. So we had that. We had the multi-factor in place. And so, we were also able to make sure that they were up to date with all of our SCCM, patching and all those controls. So everything was in place, and it was seamless to them, absolutely seamless. So, my point is it doesn't have to be a difficult thing to apply security. Yes, there are going to be some inconveniences. For example, you're not going to give people the local admin rights to where they can install whatever software they want. And so, that can be inconvenient for some people. But in terms of allowing them to do their work, you don't have to get in their way.
I love that. It's such a great, clear, pragmatic example. And even taking it a step further, I mean, you could even categorize that as being more of a risk-based authentication approach, which you're taking a measured approach. And I think that's, like you're saying there, Vaughn, that traditionally I think security has gotten a bad rap because often the user experience isn't thought as part of the process. A lot of security people came up through IT ranks and they just roll stuff out without thinking of greater ramifications of what the user experience is like. So when you can, think about that, like Malcolm is such a great proponent of having that frictionless user experience. Those are things that security professionals need to keep in mind. It's not just security for security's sake. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. There's other things at play. So that's such a great example. One quick question I wanted to ask you is, that you're talking about a lot of sort of inward-facing security, and what we've seen is this growth of vendor risk management or third-party risk, especially with enterprises being more and more concerned with the smaller organizations that they rely on. And there's that trickle-down effect now in which small and mid-sized organizations, which traditionally never really worried about cybersecurity, are coming out of the woodwork saying, we're going to lose a big contract with a big enterprise company because we actually don't have any cybersecurity in place. And we don't know how to demonstrate that. So where does sort of that broader vendor risk management fit in terms of cybersecurity for a large organization like CN?
Yeah, you definitely have to have a program where you have some assessment of that risk. And look, not all organizations that you partner with are going to have the same level of risk. A lot of it depends on how much of the data that they're gonna have of yours. Do they have any data of yours? Not everybody has your data. Yeah. Not everybody's connecting to your network or having links to you. And most of the time they don't need to. And in those rare cases where they do, you can have things in place that allow you to do that, securely. And whether that's putting them in with an escorted access type solution, where you have, especially in heavy industry, you have things where you've got partners that have to come in and administer equipment that's on your environment. You could do that with an escorted access where, they basically have somebody in your organization calls out, brings them in, and can monitor everything's being recorded that they do on that access. And so who's coming in. You can monitor everything they're doing, and if something goes wrong, you can backtrack it. And if something's going bad in that session, the person who's escorted them in can shut that session down. So you have those kinds of controls that you can put in place for the folks that really have deep access into your environment. And you can do some other things too, but there's an assessment aspect of understanding how good their program is that you have to do. There's the risk of the contracts and how much liability they're protected against with you. All of those elements play into it. But you have to have a robust program and a mature program that goes through that.
Awesome answer. I love how pragmatic you are, Vaughn. I would have loved to have worked for a CISO like you back in my corporate days.
Yeah, it's very clear. I love it too. So we have time, I think, for one more question here, and it's a big question. Cybersecurity is not just technology, and we could talk about technology, but we may alienate a lot of people in that discussion. There's also the people component of the awareness, and then there's also the policies. Can you talk about the people a little bit, and especially the policies, and how important those aspects of cybersecurity are, and that it's not just a technology issue?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I did when I got here to CN was I took a look at the policy, and when you look at humans and policies, if you want people to follow policies, you have to make them consumable. Mm-hmm. And our policy where it was not consumable. There were basically it brought you to a page, and there were links with several different documents for different aspects. And I said, okay, this has got to be simplified. What is it that we really need to address in the policy? And so we basically split it into two policies. One policy that's focused on the IT aspects, so the people who are deploying technology, and the other one that's focused on everybody else who consumes it and uses it. And we wanted to make it as short as possible, as clear as possible, and focus just on what it is that the do's and don'ts that they have to address. And so we did that, really significantly simplified it. And it was recently published, and I think that it's much more likely to be successful now, because people can actually read it. You can sit down and go through a few pages. Everything is in simple language. It makes clear sense. So it's absolutely critical that your policy be consumable. And then the other thing that you have to do is you have to reinforce that through your awareness training. So that you're basically putting it in front of people on a regular basis, and validating that they understood what it is that they're responsible for. Because, again, common sense requires common knowledge.
Amen. That's really well said. I like how you tied in the policies to the people there. And the simpler and clearer it becomes, the more uptake you'll have, and the less people will try to work around something that is either cumbersome or not easily understood. So I really appreciate you laying that out for us. Vaughn, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful conversation, amazing episode. I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Thanks again,
all right,
Vaughn.
Thank you. All right.
And Dominic and I will be right back to wrap things up.
Christian, wow, Vaughn is truly a pragmatic and modern day Chief Information Security Officer. I would have loved to have worked under someone like him. What an interesting backstory, how he just fell into a security role. And now he's the Chief Information Security Officer for CN Rail, which is one of the largest logistical companies probably in the world, but at least in North America.
Well, you can see why from his experience, from his demeanor, from his communication style and skills. He is so good at dialing things down, simplifying things, making them digestible, and as he said, consumable for the people in CN Rail to actually understand that security is something that they should take seriously, and really understand what they need to do. So really amazing conversation here with Vaughn.
Oh, absolutely. And, I think the extension of that was he was talking about the frictionless user experience. You need to keep in mind the user experience when you're rolling out security. It can't just be for security's sake. And just wonderful to talk with someone who embraces the pragmatic approach, not the theoretical approach of cybersecurity. I mean, CN picked a good one there. That's for sure.
His experience comes from the real world.
Thank you again to our viewers and listeners for always taking time out of your busy day to spend some time with us. Hope you enjoyed today's episode with Vaughn. To check out other episodes and other podcasts, please go to the Conversations That Matter YouTube page or wherever you listen to podcasts. But for right now, we wish you a good one, and we'll catch you next week.